Will I lose weight if I cut calories?
If you simply cut your calories by eating less, your body will respond by burning less.
Does fasting work for weight loss?
It's just, yeah, you might eat a little bit more at dinner, but you're not like ravenously starving. And it's okay to not eat, because what's happened is that your body has taken that food energy from your body fat. And that's perfect. That's exactly what we want it to do.
Hi, I'm Dr. Angie Holzer, and I specialize in yoga for mental health. And as a yoga instructor, I get asked a lot, how many calories do I burn in a yoga class? They want to know so they can burn off the food that they just ate. So I've put together this video to have a better understanding of what it means to help with weight loss. And some of the best ways is to combine fasting, understanding your insulin as it relates to your diet. You will hear 9 myths and the facts behind them and ways to combat weight loss. First, we'll hear an overview about how they all connect.
That every time you eat, your insulin is going to go up, assuming you're eating a mixed meal. And the insulin is actually a hormone that tells your body to store food energy, right? I mean, the whole problem of obesity is not really all that difficult. If insulin goes up, your body is supposed to store that food energy. When you don't eat, when you fast, then your body is supposed to take that food energy back out and burn it. And that's the reason that you don't die in your sleep every single night. It's because you store it and then use it, right? And this is the problem. If you eat, insulin goes up, you store it. If insulin goes down, you burn it. But you can only do one or the other. If you spend all your time eating, then you're going to spend all your time putting food in. It's like a one-way valve. The food is going in, it never comes back out. So what's going to happen? Over time, you're going to gain weight. So that's not really so difficult.
Myth 1. Eat less, exercise more. It's a great way to lose weight. Fact number 1. Eating less and exercising more doesn't work in weight loss. Weight loss hack number 1. Fasting is a proven way to lose weight and improve health.
And this sort of calorie restriction diet, which is cut a few calories off of each meal, 500 calories a day, but eat 6 times a day, that sort of advice is the sort of standard advice. So if you look at the Biggest Loser diet, for example, you reduce your calories, you increase your exercise, and it ranks really well in these sort of rankings of diets, number 3 for weight loss. We pretend we're living in this era of evidence-based medicine. That is, okay, if you think it works, well, show me the study to show that it works. Well, we've done those studies. So it didn't really work at all. You only got back to baseline through a lot of hard work at the 5th year. If before that, you're actually gaining weight. So this is the approach. It doesn't work. So if you look at long-term weight loss, what you see is that chronic calorie restriction, cutting the fat, cutting your calories, eating 6 times a day, so you're keeping your insulin high but dropping your calories, what you get is increase in hunger and a decrease in metabolism. And this is what happens. Your weight plateaus, your weight starts to regain, and you're like, oh, don't even look at me, right? As you face that sort of, all that judgmental people who are like, oh yeah, you shouldn't have regained that weight. It wasn't their fault, because we know that. This is all physiology. As opposed to fasting, where your hunger decreases, your metabolic rate stays stable or goes up, and you're like, yeah.
Myth number 2. Calories in, calories out. It's the only thing you need to worry about. Fact. When you reduce calories, your metabolism goes up and you burn less. Hack number 2. Fasting is shown to maintain or increase your metabolism.
What I had learned in medical school was all about sort of calories in, calories out sort of thing. But the more I looked into it, one, it's a very, very unsuccessful way to lose weight. Counting calories simply does not work at all. And people will say, oh, but it does. Well, if you look at the scientific studies, it doesn't. If you eat 500 calories less, your body could simply decide to burn 500 calories less, and you won't lose any body fat.
Myth number 3. Eating small, frequent meals throughout the day helps you lose weight. Fact. By eating frequent meals, you don't allow your body to rest and purge the weight. Hack. Don't snack between meals. It allows your body to rest and use stored fat as energy.
The other thing is you can't eat all the time because, again, it's a cycle between feeding and fasting. That's what we're supposed to do. If you don't give your body time to burn off all those calories that it's taken in, which means the fasting period, you're going to overall gain weight. It's like a one-way valve. If you go in but don't come out, eventually everything just gets bigger. Same thing. That energy cannot come out if your insulin levels are high. That's just the way it's designed. And it's
healthy living is balance, right? So you have to balance the eating, which is the fed state, and digestion or the fasted state. If you eat 3 meals a day over 12 hours, you have 12 hours of feeding, 12 hours of fasting. Good. 12 hours a day, you're putting food in, 12 hours a day, you're taking food out. Now you're putting food in sort of 13, 15, 16 hours of the day and not taking it out, because even after a meal, it takes a few hours before your insulin goes back down. So, and on the other side, of course, as soon as you eat, your insulin goes up right away. So there's a bit of an imbalance. So you're spending not just 14, 15 hours with your insulin high, because it takes 3 or 4 hours for your insulin to come back down to get into the fasted state. You're really talking 17, 18, 19 hours in the fed state. And now instead of 12 and 12, you're talking about sort of 18 and 6 or something like that. So you're eating all the time. You're putting food energy in all the time. And what was the problem? The problem was that now we have this big obesity crisis. But there's 2 main issues. Other than the carbohydrates and the sugar that we were told to eat, it's also the frequency. We're eating just too frequently.
Myth number 4, counting calories helps in losing weight. Fact. Not all calories are the same. Weight loss hack number 4. Eat whole foods, not processed, and eat until you're full.
Counting calories simply does not work at all. And people will say, oh, but it does. Well, if you look at the scientific studies, it doesn't.
Talking about the diet. So in most times, I actually don't recommend people count calories. I don't think it's a useful thing to do, because the body doesn't count calories. It's not a physiologic problem. What you want to do is eat until you're full. I mean, they did that in the 50s and it worked out fine for them. But what you have to do is really cut out all of these refined foods. So a lot of the refined grains specifically, or a lot of the sugar specifically. So if you're eating things like meat and real food and vegetables and so on, you're going to get full at a certain point. Because again, we think our bodies are so stupid. But the truth is that we have multiple overlapping satiety mechanisms. That is to say, if you eat protein, a hormone called peptide YY goes up. If you eat fat, cholecystokinin goes up. If you eat a lot of fibrous foods, you activate stretch receptors in your stomach. So we have multiple overlapping mechanisms that tell us not to eat. And they're very powerful, because if you think back to a time where you went to the Chinese buffet and you ate a lot of food and so on, and you said, whoa, I can't eat anymore. Like, the sight of those pork chops might make you nauseated. But half an hour ago, you're gobbling them down, right? And that's because you've activated the satiety mechanism. So you have to get back to that. But the sort of processed foods evade that. So if you're eating, you've had that big buffet and then you can't eat any more steak. But if somebody says, well, hey, do you want this cookie? You're like, yeah, sure. Because it doesn't activate those same satiety mechanisms. So the point is not to count your calories, because that's ultimately self-defeating. You could take Diet Coke, for example, 0 calories, but it doesn't have 0 insulin effect, and it's going to make you more hungry. So the point is that during that 6-hour period, you could take as many calories as you want. I don't recommend people to, but stick to real food, whole foods, and your body will tell you when to stop. If you decide that it's not working, then you simply extend it and say, okay, well, that didn't work, so I'll do a 24-hour fast and go from there. But counting calories in general is not something I recommend.
Myth number 5. I should eliminate all carbs from my diet. Fact. All carbs are not processed in the same way. Hack. Eating real foods helps in weight loss versus eating processed foods.
not all carbohydrates are bad for you. Like, clearly there have been many societies that have lived primarily on carbohydrates. Yet if you measure the insulin response, they're actually quite good. So something like the reason carbohydrates are very problematic is that they tend to be processed. So processing removes a lot of these satiety signals. So even if you've eaten a huge buffet and somebody says, hey, do you want a few sips of my soda? You'd say, sure, no problem, because they don't activate your satiety mechanisms.
And Dr. Davis talked about the difference between, say, carbohydrates, amylopectin A, which is found in grains, and beans, which have amylopectin C. It's completely different. The physiologic effect is completely different, but they're both still carbohydrates. So you really can't equate the two. That is, eating bread, I think, is relatively obesogenic, whereas eating beans is probably not. And there's a lot of studies on eating beans, and it seems to be fairly healthy. So just to say carbs, it's very different eating bread, amylopectin A, and eating beans, amylopectin C. So,
Myth number 6, there's only one way to fast. Fact. There are different ways to fast, and a mixed approach is a healthier balance. Weight loss hack number 6. Intermittent fasting can lower hunger, maintain or increase your metabolism, and help with weight loss.
They're sort of like, I call them variants, because they're not, the water-only fast is really a true fast, but you can get a lot of the benefits by taking some of these other things, and it makes it easier. So it's a sort of a trade-off. It's sort of like bulletproof coffee, which is, of course, not fasting, but it's a very, very pure sort of fat, and therefore it's going to provide a lot of satiety and then let you go through the day. Maybe it allows you to go long, and overall, you might wind up positive in terms of weight loss and so on. So lots of people certainly have found that useful, not everybody. But certainly it's that. But water-only fast can be more difficult because of the associated electrolyte problems. Your body is supposed to handle it, but it doesn't always.
So what actually happens when you don't eat for 24 hours? So those things on top, that's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, you see that ghrelin does spike. So you do get hungry at that time. But what happens when you don't eat lunch? So say you skip lunch. This is the first one, L. Does ghrelin just keep going up and up and up? No. In fact, when you get to 4 o'clock, your ghrelin has gone back down to baseline, because this line that's here is baseline. That is, you're about as hungry eating lunch as not eating lunch. And the same thing happens at dinner time. Your ghrelin goes up, yes, then you don't eat, in several hours, it just goes right back down to baseline. So the hunger doesn't build and build and build. It actually comes as a wave. If you ride out that wave, it'll just go back to baseline.
Myth number 7. If I fast, my cravings will increase. Fact. Cravings reduce as we fast. Weight loss hack number 7. Combine intermittent fasting with no sugars, and cravings stop after 3 days.
It's the same. If you look at food cravings, for example, you can compare a low-calorie diet to a very low-calorie diet. So it's interesting because you can take any of these cravings, sweets or high-fat or whatever, you put them on a 1,300 calorie a day diet. Those cravings don't do anything. The low-calorie diet does nothing. But if you eat practically nothing at all, the cravings just disappear. Because the cravings are like an itch. So any parent knows that if your child is really itchy, the last thing you really want to do is scratch it, because it's going to get more itchy. And cravings are the same. So by going into these intermittent fasting where you're really allowing nothing at all, that's going to make more benefit for your cravings than the other. And controlling hunger is the big issue. It's not about controlling calories. I mean, that's like grade school stuff, right? You have to control the metabolic rate, and you have to control your hunger signaling. That's what's important.
By day 3, day 4, the hunger is almost completely disappeared. And why is that? Well, because you're fueling yourself from your body fat stores, and therefore you actually have no need to eat. It's an interesting process which people never think about, but it's completely physiologic.
Myth number 8. If a little fasting is good, a lot is better. Fact. Moderate fasting has great results. Excess fasting can lead to problems. Weight loss hack number 8, the 5-2 schedule. Do intermittent fasting for 5 days and off for 2.
Few studies that there are that are exclusively on women show really powerful benefits from fasting. I mean, you stay young or you get younger. I mean, it's important. But I tell you, the line between fasting and starvation, the line between exercise and overtraining, it's there for almost every kind of diet, where some is good and moderate is better, and too much is not a good idea. And I call it the fasting trap, and it's one that catches women first. And what happens is, I do this and I feel great. In fact, I feel so good, I'm going to do this forever because I always want to feel this way. So then after 6 weeks, it becomes a habit, right? And it's one that works. And then something starts to go wrong. So when I was vegan, I'm like, man, my teeth are starting to hurt and I have all this joint pain and I'm really tired all the time. And I didn't know I'm getting autoimmunity and I've broken my thyroid. And then like, oh, my hair starts to fall out. Oh, and I don't have a kickstand in the morning. Now, that'll hit men after 6 weeks, usually about 8 weeks of, I'm doing intermittent fasting, 1 meal a day, every day and all that. It's because you're overdoing it. Just like if you were to go hit the gym for 2 hours a day and you didn't sleep very well, after a while, you're like, it was too much. But for women, it tends to hit them after 4 weeks. And the manifestations of over fasting in women who feel great when they first do it, it's, oh, my hair is thinning. My sleep quality goes away. That's usually the first sign. Like if you're monitoring your sleep with an Oura ring or something, like, man, I wake up and I feel like I didn't sleep very well. And then you're saying, wow, my cycle is normally pretty good, but it's either unpredictable or I'm getting more PMS than I did before, but your hormone levels are actually going off. And then they're likely to see thyroid problems as well before men do. The recommendation that I came to, especially for new fasting, people who haven't done this much, people have some weight to lose, if you're a woman, is to say, you know what? I know I feel really good on this, but I'm going to do it every other day, or I'm going to take weekends off at least, or I'm going to do a couple of the fasting hacks that reduce the biological stress on the body. And it's one of the many reasons you should mix up your types of fasting. And sadly, intermittent fasting every single day, say, I'm just never going to have breakfast again. And quite often, I'm just not going to have lunch and maybe I'll add some workouts. It's not going to end well for anyone.
Myth number 9. Fat-free foods is a healthy way to lose weight. Fact. Only when insulin is present does your body store fat. Eating healthy fats produce 0% insulin. Weight loss hack number 9. The majority of your calories should come from healthy fats.
Indeed, I know of no circumstance in any organism that stores fat, from worms to humans and every animal in between, where fat mass can increase without elevated insulin driving the fat growth. When we look at carbohydrates, we see this opposing effect, where carbohydrates will, in any situation, increase insulin and reduce glucagon. The textbook version is this complementary effect of protein, where protein is both increasing insulin and glucagon, making it somewhat of a macronutrient that people in low-carb community fear. And I'm not sure that's justified, and I'm making the case that perhaps we need to revise the way we think about it. And then fat, and each of these are just when it's consumed in its pure form. If you take a spoon of carb, a spoon of protein, or a spoon of fat, fat will not increase insulin, it will only increase glucagon. And that makes it very friendly to those of us who appreciate or respect the relevance of insulin and the pathogenicity of insulin, acknowledge that it has a hand in virtually every chronic disease. So firstly, I submit to maintain a low insulin to glucagon ratio, a person, 1, must control carbohydrates. 2, a person then, I submit, would be well served by then prioritizing protein, ensuring sufficient protein intake to maintain lean body mass and healthy function. And then 3rd, all the remaining calories are filled with fat. And so let's talk about each of these with just a moment in more detail, very briefly. By controlling carbohydrates, I do mean this very widely accepted range of around 50 grams or so per day. And this depends, of course, on the person. And that would have to be optimized a little lower or a little higher, whether the person can fudge it up a little bit. But nevertheless, whatever range they come to, to have a healthy range for that person, they do need to scrutinize the quality of the carbohydrate. And this is no surprise, of course. I exclusively define a carbohydrate as good or bad based on the degree to which it's going to spike insulin. And so this would be just some very simplistic version of that. Next one, prioritize protein. By this, I mean that when a person is ensuring sufficiently controlled carbohydrate consumption, there is then, I submit, a benefit to ensuring the person's getting that range of protein, 1 to 2 grams per kilogram body weight. But I submit to you, to maintain healthy lean body mass, we need to make sure we're getting in that range. And I think our love of fat sometimes prevents us from getting that. And that's why I wanted to mention this. Now, mind you, as I just turned 40 very recently, I'm mindful of my getting older and my kids are getting older. Our need for dietary protein goes up as we age. So as we're getting older, we need to make sure we're on the higher end. Dr. Stuart Phillips has found that, and he's really one of the legends in this area, that the older we get, the less capable our body is at converting ingested protein into muscle protein. So we do indeed need a little more. And I worry that we're sometimes not getting it. And then third, as I mentioned, we fill all the remaining calories, whether that's 1,500 or 2,000 calories, that is fat. All of our remaining caloric needs come from fat. And once again, we know this very well, and Nina spoke about this very well yesterday, we need to scrutinize the quality. And in essence, I basically say, we just stick with the fats we've been eating as a species since time immemorial. It was either eat it from the animal or make a lever big enough to compress the fruit and get the oil from the fruit. It was simple, we've been doing it. So animal and fruit fats, I submit, are better than any industrial seed oils, as we all know. And so in sum, I submit that this overly simplistic paradigm of 3 steps of a healthy diet, it is, I consider healthy because it maintains what I consider a smart, metabolically prudent insulin to glucagon ratio, keeping it low, keeping it in control, allowing the benefits of the fasted state, yet without the need for caloric restriction. And then it also ensures that we are properly nourishing the body. We're giving the body what it needs by making sure that there's some focus on protein, or to maintain the alliteration, a priority on protein. Worldwide, we are dying from diseases that were once unheard of. Each year, roughly 10 million people die from cancer and 20 million from heart disease. Alzheimer's disease affects almost 50 million people, and 500 million of us have diabetes. Less lethal, though highly relevant, 40% of men over 45 have low testosterone, and 10% of women experience menstrual irregularities and infertility. All of these disorders and more have one thing in common. Each of them, to varying degrees, is caused or exacerbated by a change in the actions and levels of the hormone insulin, a condition known as insulin resistance. And you might have it. Odds are you do. It is the most common disorder worldwide, affecting roughly half of all adults in the USA, Mexico, China, and India. Insulin resistance is even more common across the Pacific Islands, Northern Africa, and the Middle East.